population is growing by leaps and bounds, hitting 20,000 this year. A reporter with our media partner, the San Francisco Standard, will join us to dive into why and what to do. But first, a big day full of news and education here in California. Students are about to get a lot more support in financial literacy and in mental health. Governor Newsom today announced $4.7 billion to increase access to mental health services.
What we are announcing here today is just one component of our comprehensive strategy to systematically connect dots and address the issue of mental health and behavioral health once and for all in this state.
Joining us live now to discuss these new investments as well as other education issues as kids begin a new school year is State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond. Superintendent Thurmond, welcome back to Getting Answers.
Hi, Kristen. Thanks for having us on.
Of course, there's a lot to talk about. I want to start with Governor Newsom, his announcement, and he cited a stunning figure that 284,000 youth have major depression. I know you have done a lot of work on student mental health as well. How do we get here?
You know, clearly in the pandemic, we've seen a rise in depression as students are dealing with the trauma of the coronavirus pandemic. For Black students, there's a doubling of the rate of depression and suicide. For all students, an increase in depression. Also a doubling of suicide rates for LGBTQ plus students. So we know it's a tough time on young people. We're all experiencing trauma, but you know, with more mental health supports, we can support the needs of our students and at the same time, help them be in a better position to be successful academically.
Yeah, you brought up suicide, and I saw the figure that's just so sad. Kids 10 to 18 have increased their rate of suicide 20% from 3 years ago. And even more alarming, that 2/3 of kids with depression get no treatment. Is that right?
Yeah, it's true. And part of the problem is that there just aren't enough providers, you know, almost anywhere where families are looking for resources, whether it's a pediatrician, there are a waiting list. For mental health resources, there are a waiting list. And so one of the things that we're doing, and we've worked with our governor and our legislature to increase the number of mental health counselors who are available to help California kids. We are working on recruiting 10,000 mental health counselors just for schools alone. No other state has embarked on such an ambitious goal as it's needed. Some of the measures that the governor talked about today are some of the things we can do right now to expand mental health services. A lot we can do with Medi-Cal dollars to get schools more resources right now to support kids, because we know that's critical.
Yeah, I mean, we all know kids whose parents say they can't find them a therapist. You're right, there is certainly a shortage there. So the training will do a lot, but also as part of that $4.7 billion investment, I understand there's a virtual mental health care platform being set up. Talk to us about what that means.
Well, I know that part of what the governor launched not long ago is an initiative that would create what I call the no wrong door way to get access to mental health. And so that means there are various ways that you can be supported, you know, in a one-on-one kind of way, in person with the therapist. Some folks like the online. There are a lot of online platforms now being provided for various kinds of mental health. There's also a new phone number that anyone can call any time of the day to talk to a counselor, and there's several call centers all across the state. 988. All you have to do is call 988 or text 988, and you can be connected to a counselor who can help you immediately. This is part of the National Suicide Hotline, but it's really just for counseling in any way. And these are call centers where they'll connect you if you need additional supports and services. And so in order to meet the need, when there's a limitation on the number of counselors, we have to use all different types of modalities to deliver supports to our students.
Right. And the shortage, you know, let's talk a little bit about that. I know you're talking about training 10,000 mental health care workers just for schools, but we have so many schools here in California, and typically in one school you may have one or two, if you're lucky, dealing with hundreds or maybe even thousands of kids. And sometimes the answer is referral outside, and you know that can be very expensive, and oftentimes insurance doesn't cover it. So I guess what I'm asking is, how do we ensure there are enough free services to students?
Yeah, well, I do want to emphasize that our new program means that we have scholarships of up to $20,000 for anyone who wants to become a counselor, and we can, share an email for people who are interested. That's a brand new scholarship that we've just worked on. In terms of free services, there's also the Medi-Cal program. This is the federal Medicaid program. Many schools use it. We're working with schools to expand the number of schools, districts that use Medi-Cal. And so that means that young people can be supported even if they don't have any insurance, and that they get the supports that they need. There's an initiative that's been approved in our state called Community Schools. The governor talked about that today. This is a way of providing wraparound supports at school. $4 billion has been invested for community schools. Our office is implementing grants to schools to have a community schools coordinator. Mm-hmm. This is for healthcare, mental health support, social services, and it's all completely free. And so we recognize the need, and we're finding ways to deliver no-cost supports to our students in the state.
Great. I want to talk about a different kind of grant. Your office made a major announcement today as well, and that seeks to improve students' financial literacy. What do we mean when we say financial literacy, and why is that important?
It's amazing, that over the years, what we call financial literacy is really just a way of saying that we teach personal finance to students and learn ways that they have awareness about, not going to check cashing places and knowing how to balance their checkbook. But what this does, it actually creates ways for students to learn in a more engaging way, learn about math and learn into other concepts. Even our Cal State University system is going to be requiring a new requirement to enter called quantitative reasoning. And if you take a financial literacy course, that counts. So today we announced that the state is offering schools $3.5 billion in grants that they can use for financial literacy materials and training. And we we shared some partnership today where someone's offering $1 million to teachers to get grants, professional development, and training. We want to thank Tim Ranzetta, who runs a nonprofit that helps teachers get trained in financial literacy. And so today we shared that news. This is going to help our students prepare to meet the A to G requirements, and of course, just to improve personal finance, keep them out of debt, and make sure they learn important things about how to manage in the world.
I've always thought that to be so important. In fact, I think 27 states currently require high schools to offer financial literacy, and only 15 states require students to take it as a graduation requirement. And California is not actually on that list. But do you think that needs to change? Do you think that actually should become a requirement?
My anticipation is that there will become a requirement in the next few years, but it requires new legislation. And we've said that we'd be willing to sponsor that legislation as early as next year. And there are some who brought forward bills to try and get this passed. And for whatever reason, California is not there yet. But this is a huge step by offering the $3.5 billion to provide, financial literacy and training. It helps to get us there. I think this is a great way to start until we actually have the requirement that will come through the law, hopefully as soon as next year.
So there's a component for districts to apply and a way for teachers to apply, right? Is there also money to support districts that are thinking of hiring a personal finance teacher or specialist?
Yeah, this grant from the state will support every district, will get some amount that they can use for financial literacy. And the work that we launched today means that a handful of districts like Los Angeles and San Francisco and others can get dollars to actually hire staff. If the district is willing to spend some money, this grant would match that, and they can hire staff to continue working on personal finance and financial literacy. And then, of course, there are grants, stipends for teachers to be able to go to professional development and training. A lot of times teachers have to do this on their own time. Now they're being offered a stipend to take the training so they can take time away from work to get this training to support our students.
That's great. Look, I certainly could have used lessons on how to balance a checkbook when I was in high school. Would have saved me a little trouble later on in life. So we'll see when that can become, a requirement in California. But this is a good start. All right, Tony Thurman, please don't go away. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk about how schools are getting ready for the new year and this third year of the pandemic. We'll be right back. All right, we have Superintendent Tony Thurman with us, so it's always a pleasure when he can find the time for us. If you have any questions for him, please feel free to ask right now on Facebook Live, which is a good way to do it. And I want to address some of the questions that are coming in from our viewers, and I'm going to try to curate this to see which ones have a lot of people asking. If you're going to teach history, okay. Yeah, okay, someone commented, if you're going to teach financial literacy, teach the history of systemic racism and slavery. That's coming out in history books. So I know you've paid a lot of attention to telling the stories of marginalized people in the textbooks and the curriculum. Are we making any changes with regard to that?
We are, and as we segue from the financial literacy, just want to give a big shout out to Tim Ranzetta, who is a Bay Area resident who runs Next Gen Personal Finance, and they came up with the curriculum. They're providing it for free and the stipends. As it relates to teaching about the impacts of racism and slavery, that is something that we are working to do. California now has an ethnic studies graduation requirement, and we've provided a model curriculum on how to teach ethnic studies so that young people can learn about the contributions of their ancestors. This helps students of color do better in school, but it helps all students from all backgrounds do well in school. And so school districts, as we speak, are working to strengthen their ethnic studies curricula. San Francisco Unified already has one. There are many districts in the Bay Area that do, and across the state. But we're working with them to develop their own curricula, those that don't have one now.
All right. Do we have time for another question before we come back from break? 30 seconds. All right, I'll make it quick. Alexandra says, love home economics. Why did they take that out?
You know, schools can still teach that. You know, people shifted away from a lot of the things that we all learned. I enjoyed shop and home ec, and now schools are coming back to it largely in our career technical education space. And so our schools are providing these things again, and financial literacy will be a big part of that. And it's a great way to teach economics in our schools.
Indeed. All right, coming back in 4 seconds. And we are back on air with the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond. Superintendent Thurmond, thanks for joining us. We're talking about the latest issues in education as kids begin a new school year. By the way, folks, feel free to ask your questions on our Facebook Live feed. So let's talk about COVID. We're starting the third school year with the pandemic here. In the first 2 years, there was a lot of state money given to districts to provide COVID tests and masks. Is that still available this year, or are districts and students more on their own now?
You know, there still is an amazing amount of support for our schools. Our state legislature just gave a huge increase to school districts, about 13% of their base funding, to help them meet any need. And on top of that, the state provided schools with what's essentially more than an $8 billion block grant. And so schools have resources to keep kids safe. I've heard from many superintendents that they have provided rapid COVID tests to families so they can test before school starts. That way, if we know someone's sick, they can stay home, and we can keep everyone at school safe and keep our schools open. So California school leaders are showing that we know how to do this, and we're going to hope for the best and try to keep everyone safe and keep everyone learning.
That is the goal, right? Look, at one point, the governor and the state indicated there would be a vaccination requirement to go to school, attend school. That seems to have gone away. Do you know what the vaccination rate in the K-12 population is statewide? I think only about 2/3 of 12 to 17-year-olds are vaccinated, and a little over 1/3 of elementary school age children are vaccinated. How do you feel about that?
I think if you ask most people, especially those who work in public health, they would say that they had hoped that we'd have a larger uptake rate of young people who would have a vaccine, especially younger children. And I think we've seen the numbers drop off some as it relates to vaccine. And so we do encourage people that getting vaccine is still a great way to keep everyone safe from the most serious consequences that COVID can bring, and is important to how we keep schools safe. I just want to give a shout out to all of our students. I continue to see them, even when it's not a requirement. They're wearing masks at school. They're doing things that are going to keep them safe and help keep our schools open. And we do want to encourage everyone, get a vaccine and get a booster if you're eligible, so that we can keep everyone safe and keep our schools and our businesses and our communities open.
Will there still be outreaches through the schools to get kids vaccinated if they want?
Yes, many of our school districts offer vaccine events right on school. I mean, there's some things being debated about whether or not there'll be a new law in California that would allow teenagers to have the ability to make their own decisions about getting a vaccine. That's not the law in California now. You still need to have parental consent. But our schools are offering vaccine days on campus and outreach at community centers and health centers so that we can keep everyone safe and keep our schools open.
Right. Yeah, I think you're talking about State Senator Scott Wiener's bill. We have talked about that, so we'll see what happens there. But it seems like in the first 2 years of the pandemic, the emphasis in terms of limiting school transmission is mainly on masking and social distancing. But increasingly, experts are saying better air quality is key, and not only for COVID, right, for a variety of health reasons. So it seems like a lot of schools, though, have not invested in upgrading air filtration. So I wonder, what are your thoughts on that?
You're right. You know, air purification systems, ventilation systems, all of these things make a huge difference in minimizing the spread of COVID. And it's been a while. I think it's probably a year ago we made some major webinars and training opportunities for schools on how to utilize money that we've given them for ventilation upgrades. And I think schools are still figuring it out. We even did workshops on how to do more outdoor classrooms so that when we have cooler weather, in the fall, moderate climate before the rain season, that we can do more outside, again, as a way of keeping students safe. And some schools have done that. A lot of schools in San Mateo County have really accelerated around outdoor classrooms. So yeah, ventilation, fresh air, air purifiers, all these things help. And schools do have dollars provided from the state to make these upgrades. And we'll keep providing technical assistance on how to do that.
All right. And I know you're keeping a close eye on learning loss that we saw that was really accelerated by the pandemic, but math and reading scores seem to have fallen, with half the students not performing at grade level. How do you plan to address that?
Yeah, we share the same concerns about the learning loss. And one of the things that we've been working on is how do we support reading as a start. And I named an initiative to make sure we help all of our children learn to read by third grade and to bolster reading at every level. I'm pleased to tell you that we've secured about $250 million just now in the state budget to have literacy coaches and specialists at many schools, especially the schools that have the greatest need around reading. We're going to make sure that we make this a priority. We're going to work with our families to do more outreach on the importance of reading, because if you learn to read, you can read to learn almost every subject. And so we believe that part of the way that we will work through the learning gaps is by improving reading fluency and literacy and biliteracy, so our students are learning to read and write in more than one language.
All right, we talked in the last segment about the shortage in mental health care providers and support for students. I also want to talk about the teacher shortage, which is pretty severe right now. San Francisco Unified started the school year trying to fill 100 open positions. Oakland Unified, about 40 positions. We're seeing that some teachers are having to take on classes for which they don't have the proper credentials. What do you intend to do to quickly recruit and train more teachers?
Yeah, my heart goes out to the districts and to our teachers and classified staff. We know that there are shortages all across the state, all across the country, and there are shortages in every single workforce sector, not just in education. But in the meantime, we are working to recruit more. We're rolling out a public service announcement campaign about the importance of teaching and how we want to get more teachers. We are offering scholarships to those who want to get a teaching credential. We can provide right now $20,000 to anyone who wants to get a teaching credential. We have what's called a residency program, where you can get a stipend while you're training under the tutelage of an experienced teacher, and you're learning how to become a teacher, and you can get a stipend while you learn. And so we're rolling all these programs out. We're putting a call out to teachers. We have a lot of military bases in our state where there are folks who are teachers, or they have a spouse who's a teacher, and we're putting a call out to how we can get them. Our governor has given an executive order that makes it easier for retired teachers to come back to the profession. We're looking at short-term needs while we focus on long-term recruitment and doing all we can to help build out our workforce.
All right, there's so many balls up in the air that you're juggling right now. We really appreciate you coming on the show to talk to us about the latest efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for getting the word out. Take care.
All right, coming up after the break, the latest report on homelessness in San Francisco, the shocking forecast, and alarming disparities. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, thank you for your great questions today for Superintendent Tony Thurmond. Really appreciate them, and glad you're here with us. We'll take a short break and be right back. Welcome back. A stunning new report shows a whopping 20,000 people in San Francisco will experience homelessness at some point this year. And one racial demographic group will be especially hard hit. That's according to data collected from the biannual homeless point-in-time count conducted in February and March. Our media partners at the San Francisco Standard have written an article on this new report on homelessness in San Francisco. And joining us live now to talk about it is David Shosted. Thank you so much for joining us, David. Tell us about this count. It's federally required, right? But skipped last year?
Yeah, so this count is required by the federal government in order for San Francisco to receive funds for their homeless services. And the count is conducted first in February, and then researchers follow up in March to get more demographic data, and that's what we got today.
Okay, so 20,000 homeless people this year. I think a few years ago it was some 7,000. How do we get a threefold increase in such a short amount of time?
Well, actually, those are two different data points. So there's the point in time count, which is actually what this report was meant to refer to. But then they count how many people actually access the services over an entire year. And that number has the last I had heard of it from Department of Public Health, it was 18,000. So this isn't exactly a new number, and it's not as if we increased from 7,000 to 20,000, because the 7,000 number is referring to on a single night how many people they're counting.
I see. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. Still, it's a pretty big increase. Why did the crisis get so severe?
Right. Well, so actually we saw a big increase in the city's Latino homeless population, and the city attributes that to that community being especially hard hit by COVID.
Can you dive a little deeper into that in terms of the Latino population? I see we're talking about 30% of the city's entire homeless population are Latino. And, you talked about why, they're a little more hard hit during the pandemic, but explain some of the factors why.
Right. So actually, there's respondents that gave answers to why they are homeless. And the majority of them said that they lost their job, or that was the main reason that people gave. We also saw a large increase in unsheltered homelessness in District 9, which is the Mission District. And there had been some thoughts that that district had been especially hard hit. And some of the other respondents gave answers such as drug addiction or eviction as reasons to why they were living on the streets.
What about blacks, who make up 6% of the general population in San Francisco? Does the report say anything about that demographic group? Right.
So they're very much overrepresented in the city's homeless population. I think the number is about 30% of the city's total homeless population are black people. And so that community that's been a sustained number that's been reported over and over. And we haven't seen too much of a change in that from 2019.
All right, the data was collected just a few weeks, I think, after Mayor Breed declared a state of emergency in the Tenderloin, in part to address this. Did that affect the count?
Right. So a lot of people were looking to see if there would be less homeless people in the Tenderloin because of those efforts and how close it was to the count being collected. But actually, we saw there was a 5% increase in the Tenderloin, while some of the surrounding neighborhoods also saw an increase. So it seems that the efforts there didn't really impact how many people were living on the streets.
So then, if that didn't pay off, at least immediately, what are some of the solutions being looked at?
Right. So as it pertains to the city's Latino population, the city says that they're going to start investing in more Spanish-speaking resources for those people. There's, a lot of permanent supportive housing units that are coming online, somewhere in the range between 2,000 and 3,000 new units that are supposed to come online in the next year or so. I think the Department of Homelessness is crossing their fingers and really hoping that those efforts make a big impact in the next count.
All right. Is there any good news here in that? Are there areas of the city where homelessness went down, or are there any indicators that, something is working well?
Yeah, so we saw a big decrease in the Bayview, and we also saw a big decrease in people living in their vehicles in San Francisco. I'd like to, celebrate those data points, but with this data, it's so hard to tell whether those people actually found housing or, whether they're just like pushed into another part of this city or into, another city entirely.
Right. This is one data point, and we'll have to kind of keep following in the long term to really see where things progress. David, thank you so much for your time and sharing the article with us.
Thanks for having me.
And you can check out more of the San Francisco Standard's other original reporting on their website, sfstandard.com. And ABC7 will continue to bring you more segments featuring the Standard's city-focused journalism. And remember, you can get our live newscasts, breaking news, weather, and more with our ABC7 Bay Area streaming TV app. Just search ABC7 Bay Area and download it wherever you stream. We'll take a break and be right back.
Eight, 7, 6, 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you so much for joining us on this interactive show, Getting Answers Today. We'll be here every weekday at 3 on air and on live stream answering your questions. World News Tonight with David Muir is coming up next. Bye-bye.